Welcome to our webinar, Keeping Seed in the Public Domain, Seed Banks and Libraries. My name is Steph Hughes, and I'm a Regional Coordinator in Atlantic Canada for the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security. This program's goal is to increase the quality, quantity, and diversity of seed grown ecologically and organically across Canada. Our work is really multifaceted, and an important aspect of it is supporting and encouraging those who want not only to grow seed, but to collect and conserve seed and germplasm for future use. So over the last 2.5 years, we've seen this incredible enthusiasm for seed conservation, and we've partnered with groups across the country to support projects to that end. It's our view that biodiversity is really at the heart of a resilient food system, and for that reason, we're really thrilled to present today's webinar, which explores different pathways to seed conservation. So thank you to everyone who's joined us on the line. It's a busy harvest season, we know, and it means a lot to us that you're giving us your time. Today's webinar is the third in our series, Seed Systems Broadening Our Knowledge. We have one more to go, which is the People's Choice. We've received around 40 questions and suggestions from people like you, so thank you very much. We're currently exploring who are the right people to answer those questions, and as soon as we know who will be speaking and when, we will let you know. All of our webinars, including this one, and our partners' webinars are recorded and available online. You can access literally hours of high-quality seed education by visiting our website, seedsecurity.ca. So the most pertinent links are on your screen now, and this webinar will be added to that list within the week. A few technical details before we get started. If you're having any trouble hearing us, you may want to adjust your speakers. You can do that both with the speaker volume icon at the top of your screen or through your computer and speaker settings at home. If you're having technical trouble with the audio through your computer, you also have the option of dialing into our phone line, which many of you have done. So the number and code are on the screen now. If you do call in, you can mute your line by pressing *6, which helps keep kind of interference and unnecessary disturbance to We have a terrific lineup of speakers today. We'll hear a brief introduction to our topic from Bob Wildfong, followed by Axel Diederechsen, who will speak on the topic of gene banks from his experience at PGRC. We'll hear from Matthew Kemshaw in BC, who will speak about community seed libraries, and finally from Rupert Adams, who will touch on the topic of living seed banks. We'll do a short round of questions after each presentation, and time allowing, we'll do some wrap-up questions at the end. So for those of you who've never done a webinar with us before, you can ask questions by typing them into the chat pod at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can do that during the presentations or after, and I'll pull from that pool of questions and direct them to our presenters. So I want to warmly welcome our speakers and also humbly acknowledge that for the first time we are presenting an all-male panel today, meaning that this time around we haven't quite achieved the gender balance that we always strive to achieve in our webinars and projects. Globally, seed saving is an area where women have traditionally and in modern times had an incredible presence and shown an incredible amount of leadership. So I want to take a moment to just give a shout out to the seedy women who are on the line and the seedy women across the country who are doing this work and doing it really brilliantly. And also thank our male presenters who I know will present well-rounded perspectives on their chosen topics. Just as a curious aside, if you'd like to learn more about all-male panels around the world, here's a link to an interesting and entertaining CBC interview on the topic. So you can jot that down to look up later over breakfast someday. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Bob Wildfong, who will give us an overview of seed conservation in Canada. So Bob has been saving and teaching about food biodiversity for over 20 years. From apples to zucchini, he mixes science and storytelling to reveal the secret lives of seeds, plants, and pollinators. As Executive Director of Seeds of Diversity Canada, Bob helps connect seed savers from coast to coast to rescue endangered Canadian seeds and food plants and to help develop markets for biodiverse food. So thanks for being here, Bob. Welcome back.
Thank you. This is a really interesting and important topic for me. And I mean, seed banks, seed libraries, have gotten a lot of attention over the last few years and it's become a really hot topic. So I know there will be lots of people interested in this. And when I think about why does it matter ensuring public access to seeds, I think in the big picture, we have to sort of think about our long-term seed security as a big aspect of our food security. There are literally hundreds of thousands of seed varieties that come to us from all over the world, and they belong to us, and we have to use them or lose them. It's up to us to make sure that we keep this enormous resource that is it's seriously our only hope for adaptation of the food system. I'd like everybody to think about what were you eating 15 or 20 years ago, and think about what your parents and your grandparents were eating, say 30, 50, 80 years ago. Our food has changed. Throughout the past century, our food has changed in so many ways, technologically, different culinary choices, different food processing choices, and the way that has changed has been through the use of natural food diversity that exists in the gene pool. The problem is, if we want to see 20 years from now that we'll be able to adapt our food system to whatever conditions there are, and we know that things are changing. The problem is that the numbers we see are that something like 3/4 of all the crop diversity has disappeared over the last century. And when we look at what's left, only about maybe 10% of that, or maybe less, is being used. So the other 90% is being stored in seed banks. And that's why it matters. That's why it matters for all of us to be engaged in grabbing hold of whatever's left and not letting it go through our fingers. It's why all around the world seed banks were established over the last half century. And we are very, very lucky in Canada because our government seed bank here is really very, very open to working with NGOs compared with other countries. We're awfully lucky to have a very good connection with our local seed bank, and very lucky, as evidence, that the curator of our National Seed Bank, Axel Diederechsen, is here on the phone line with us. Seed banks are like great big warehouses that store hundreds of thousands of varieties of seeds. But they can only store a small amount of each kind, and that means they fulfill a role of collecting and stabilizing genetic diversity, but they can't really distribute a lot of seeds to everybody. You can't have every farmer get their seeds out of the seed bank. On the other side of the spectrum are seed companies, which multiply large amounts of each seed variety so that they can distribute them to people who grow the seeds. But because they're dealing with large volumes of each variety, they can only deal with a smaller number of varieties. And to give you an example, imagine a seed company with a catalog of 100,000 kinds of seeds. That would be great, right? That would be awesome. We would all love that. But that company could never run the business. It's just economically impossible. So we have this fundamental trade-off. In seed banks, there are lots of varieties, but not much ability to provide large quantities of any variety. And then on the other side of the spectrum, seed companies, which have an ability to provide lots of seeds of each variety, but not so many varieties. That's a fundamental trade-off, and I think we run into that all the time in seed collecting and in any kind of project where you're collecting seeds and multiplying them and trying to distribute them. You run into this trade-off that you can't have lots of varieties and lots of quantity of each variety at the same time, unless you're dealing with only a small collection. But as you scale up, you run into this thing, and we'll come back to this. I'm sure that our speakers will come back on this fundamental concept over and over and again. But what's really interesting, so we've had seed banks for half a century, and we've had seed companies for twice or three times as long as that. Recently, these seed libraries have kind of come up the middle and engaged communities in doing collecting and distributing. They're kind of bridging that gap. They're able to engage people to collect little mini seed banks of seeds, but also able to distribute seeds within their communities to people who will use them. So there's a very interesting model. I honestly don't know where it's going yet. We're really excited to see how it develops. It's such a new thing, and I'm sure we'll hear lots of different ideas about how seed libraries work. I'll give you one one example of a model, which is Seeds of Diversity's national network. As a national network, Seeds of Diversity doesn't reach into the community level as much as community seed libraries do. But Seeds of Diversity has tended to play a role in bridging the gap between community seed collectors and institutional seed banks. And that means that those don't have to exist in separate worlds. The institutional seed bank doesn't have to be in a sort of a removed realm from the community. We can make that bridge. And that's one of the things that this new seed library movement, I think, is really important for. Main thing is it engages people, and we all need to be engaged in this because we have this wonderful plant diversity and we need to use it or lose it. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm really eager to hear our speakers talk about it.
Great. That's wonderful, Bob. Thanks very much. I think that sets the scene really well for Matthew, Axel, and Rupert. So our first presenter this evening, I think I said this in the wrong order earlier, but Matthew Kemshaw is going to be our presenter. Matthew Kemshaw has been supporting urban food programming in schools, parks, and other community spaces for almost a decade. Matthew began saving seeds 10 years ago with elementary school children. He has gone on to support several community seed sharing initiatives in both Victoria and Vancouver. In 2013, Matthew helped pull together a unique network of librarians, seed savers, and community programmers to design and implement the Victoria Seed Library. He's excited to continue to grow this network and further develop understanding of how to run a successful community seed library embedded in the local book library. Matthew is currently collaborating with a network of seed librarians across Canada while working to develop the Surrey Seed Library in BC. So thanks very much for being here, Matthew. That's your presentation now.
Great, thanks, Steph. Yeah, so I'm going to speak, I guess, specifically to the community scale, kind of local or regional seed library. And as Steph mentioned, I've been working in Victoria as well as in Surrey to support those two public libraries in starting community-run seed collections and seed sharing initiatives in both libraries. So I'm going to be presenting specifically, I guess, about some of the things we've learned from running the Victoria Seed Library. It's still a fairly new initiative. We're just wrapping up our second year, but we've learned a lot in those 2 short years about how to kind of run and manage a community seed collection. And our focus and the focus of my presentation is really about trying to understand how to support communities in getting access to seed and thinking about how we can really reduce barriers and try to support more people in getting involved with the practice of seed saving and recognizing that seed is really the storage place of culture, and how do we try to tell that story of seed by sharing and trading seed through a public library or another community space. So
I'm just going to interrupt you there for a second because there is a little bit of a side or background conversation coming through. So just for everyone who's logged in on the phone line, who's not Matthew or a presenter, it's really important to mute your line so that we don't hear what's going on in your space. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah. So the Victoria Seed Library was established on a slightly different model than I think a lot of people think about when they think of a community seed library, particularly in a public library. We're open only every second Saturday, and it's a volunteer-run seed library where members can sign out and return seed at the library. And we also provide lots of seed-saving information and advice for everyone. So people can become members of the Victoria Seed Library, and they actually have to attend a member orientation training session before they are a member of the Seed Library. It's completely free and open to everybody, and once people have attended that orientation training session, they get access to our collection of seeds, and they can come to our Seed Library table, which we open only every second Saturday for people to come and take out seeds. And there's some benefits to this kind of a system. It's easier for us to manage our seeds, and we can keep the seeds really well organized and clean. But it also has some barriers. Obviously, the seed library is not open all of the time, and people have to really plan to come down to the library to to get their seeds and to return their seeds back to the library. Another common model for running a community seed library is this sort of system where the public just helps themselves to seed, and it's commonly these kinds of seed libraries are housed in old card catalogs or in other kinds of storage places, and this is really nice because it's really easy for people to come and just take out seed whenever. It's very open and easily accessible. Yeah, there's not very many barriers to people accessing seed from a community seed library of this type, but it provides some interesting challenges for somebody trying to run a seed library. This kind of seed library is difficult to keep organized. It's difficult to track seed and what's being signed out and what's being returned back to the seed library, and so having really clear systems for signing out and returning seed, and having also systems for managing and organizing the seed collection are really important. And I've heard from a lot of different seed libraries around North America, different strategies and ways that people manage this kind of collection. And certainly there are lots of successful examples of seed libraries of this type that are working really well. And there are some others where the seeds don't seem to get replaced, and it becomes kind of a bit of an unused corner of the local library. Along with providing seed to people and having a system for signing out and returning seed back to the seed library, seed libraries and communities tend to really focus on providing information about seed saving and gardening, hosting celebrations and cultural events that celebrate and support seed knowledge in the community, and yeah, really try to invite people in the community to get involved with seed saving. And so there's a lot of work that seed libraries do around education and communication and hosting different kinds of celebrations and events and workshops throughout the growing season. And so this is something that we've been doing and learning more and more about what kinds of events and things can we host that will really support people in participating and actually getting involved with starting to save some seed in their own backyard or community gardens. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about starting a seed library, and certainly when we were thinking about starting a seed library, we came up against a lot of different questions about how do we manage the seeds in the seed library, and how do we ensure that the seeds that the library has are going to maintain their genetic sort of purity, and how can we guarantee that the seed in our collection is even viable or of any kind of quality. And one thing that a lot of seed libraries do is they try to assign levels of easiness to different crops. And so you have sort of your relatively self-fertile varieties of vegetables, things like lettuce, peas, and beans, and tomatoes that don't very readily cross-pollinate with other members of their family, and so are relatively easy for seed savers to save and to ensure that you're saving the genetic information in a specific varietal. And so with the Victoria Seed Library, we've actually kind of started the seed library only allowing sharing through the official collection of these kinds of varieties. So we don't actually provide any varietals that are readily able to cross-pollinate with other members of their family. So we really have primarily beans, peas, tomatoes, and lettuce in the collection, and then a number of different flowers and herbs. And that's one way to really kind of eliminate a lot of the really sort of, I think, overwhelming kinds of considerations that you have to make when saving seed. And so for beginners, I think offering only these self-fertile varieties is a really great place to start and can be a really successful way to run a seed library, is only having a library that offers self-fertile varieties. Obviously, there's important education that needs to be done about hybrid seed and GMO seed. A lot of people in the community want to know more about GMOs, and it becomes something they have to talk about in workshops and trying to create more knowledge and understanding about the differences between open pollinated hybrid and GMO seed. And with our seed library, we've gotten a lot of feedback from members that that's been one of the big learnings for people participating in the seed library, starting to get a little bit more of an understanding about those differences and starting to learn more about some of the basic things you need to know to be a good seed saver. Other issues like isolation distance and minimum population sizes are issues that you need to consider, and how those are going to be addressed. If somebody's only saving seed from 1 or 2 lettuce plants and returning it back to the seed library, is that good enough to include in the collection? And how do you deal with those kinds of questions? It's an ongoing conversation that we're having in the Victoria Seed Library. How long do you store your seeds for? What kinds of systems do you have for storing seeds? I know that the Seeds of Diversity has a great resource for running a community seed bank, like kind of a primer on storing and managing a seed collection with some interesting information in there. But there's a lot of questions about whether you want to have backup storage of your seeds or just put it all out into the community. Do you do germination testing or not? Last year we did germ tests on all of our collection and only returned the seeds that had reasonably good results back into the library. And then, like, what kinds of management systems do you have to track and run an effective seed library so that you can keep records and ensure that the seeds that you're offering to the community are going to grow for people, and also create systems to help you, I guess, evaluate what the community is really getting out of the seed library, and how well or how effective your project is being in meeting the goals and the visions that the community set for it. So having both effective evaluation systems as well as basic systems for tracking who signs out seed and who returns seed and all of that kind of thing are really important, I think, to having a really effective, robust community seed library. So the truth of it is that making seed available to the community is relatively straightforward. Getting seed is quite simple. You can often get donations of seed from local seed companies, and offering it out to the community can be pretty easy. But keeping seed in the community is much more complex. Getting people to return seed back to the seed library and actually keeping a robust community seed library running, wherein people are actually the ones holding the seed in the sort of public domain and continuing to share seed generation after generation. It's a much more challenging task, and one that a lot of seed libraries are continuing to learn about, and certainly we are in that stage as well. We've been doing a lot of work trying to support people in learning more about drying and processing their seed and hosting events with different kinds of technologies to help people screen and package their seeds. And we're finding that that's, one way of just inviting more seed to come back to the seed library. Another thing that I've heard regularly from seed libraries across North America is just that it takes about 5 years of running a seed library before you start to see any kind of measurable amounts of seed being returned back to the seed library. We find there's a lot of people who are just nervous about their ability to actually successfully save seed, and they need to kind of try it out on their own for a few years before they have a level of confidence that makes them feel like they can contribute seed to the community seed library, and know that the seed they're contributing is a reasonable level of quality. So I think it takes patience and perseverance and a lot of learning to kind of make it happen, which is not a silver bullet. Another thing that we've been very successful with is just kind of creating a bit of a partnership between the public library in Victoria and in Surrey and this community organization whom I work for, the Life Cycles Project Society. So the library is really responsible for hosting the space and kind of helping to manage registration for events. They store our seed collection. They also help promote the seed library through their communications, and librarians within the library system answer community questions about the seed library. A community organization, in our case, it's Life Cycles. We're responsible more for the knowledge of seed saving and backyard gardening, helping to lead and organize workshops and seed-saving events. We also do most of the work of actually tracking and managing the seed collection, organizing our seeds, and also communicating with seed library members. We also develop communication materials and strategies to help educate people about seeds and seed saving. We create simple explanations for library staff and volunteers, and we perform yearly evaluations of our program to learn what's working, what's not, and how we can make it better. And I think this model is a kind of a useful one for just thinking about how a community seed library can really work in different contexts, and having a partnership where there's multiple different people involved, and you know, in our case, multiple different organizations, is very effective. Seed libraries are made effective by lots of different people working together to make them happen, and having two organizations, a community organization and some sort of community institution, working together in this way seems to be quite effective. So we found that by hosting celebrations, we can attract lots of attention to our seed library. In Victoria, we have over 200 members who have gone and participated in a 1-hour seed-saving workshop and are signing out seeds actively. Hosting these celebrations brings a lot of people kind of in. We get a lot of people stopping by asking questions about seeds. We host lots of introductory workshops and seed-saving sort of workshops to help build basic knowledge, and this has been a way to keep our members kind of learning and growing in their seed-saving skills. And we've had some positive feedback about these basic workshops, just helping people with some of the really sort of fundamental aspects of seed saving, the difference between hybrid and open pollinated seed and that sort of thing. But we've really found this year that hands-on work with seeds is what people really need to be able to build that level of confidence so that they can start actually saving seed and returning it back to the seed library. So this year we've really started to reach out a lot more to local farms, and we've had really strong relationships with our local growers since the beginning, but we're wanting to take people out in our community to local farms and to see really, you know, profound good seed savers at work in their fields, going out and doing hands-on work with seeds throughout the growing season. We've been trying to take people out and provide opportunities to get out there and really see how it's done, and learn in that very real way of connecting with the seeds and with people who have been growing seeds for many years. That kind of experience seems pretty crucial for helping people build confidence with their own seed-saving practices in their backyard and community garden. And we believe, we don't have the sort of information to confirm it, but that this is going to result in a lot more people returning seed in the long run. We're working on trying to support some different community grow-out programs where we can grow lots of seed, finding individual growers who want to work with us to grow a specific variety and bulk it up. And I think this is a way to really also start getting more seed back to the library. With the Environmental Youth Alliance, who I also work for, I've been working with local farms and actually high schools and different youth groups to grow seed in specific little plots for community seed libraries, as well as for a little seed company that we run, and working to just have a bunch of different community groups and schools and different organizations growing a row of seed in their community garden or on their farm for the community seed library could be a way to ensure that, you know, you have at least one dedicated grower who's really going to focus on growing one specific varietal and make sure that that varietal is bulked up and going to be able to continue to be offered through the seed library. The last thing that I'll mention is this new website that we've been trying to, I guess, launch, which is it's called borrowsaveshare.com, and its intention is to support and network seed libraries and other seed sharing initiatives across British Columbia. Our aim is to share community seed saving practices and organizational systems. So this website is up now, and I've been reaching out and trying to contact all the seed libraries in BC to get their input, and also create a little seed sharing newsletter, which we're going to start distributing this fall. And I would really love to get input from the people who are listening on this panel, and also to be able to offer some resources through this website to folks who are interested in starting their own seed library. There are lots of good resources that we've assembled from really all over North America that are listed on our website there. And this is kind of emerging at the same time as an international seed library organization is trying to sort of assemble to help support and network seed libraries really all over North America. A small group of us met in May at the first International Seed Library Forum, which was hosted in Tucson, Arizona, and I've been meeting with folks who were at that event once a month since then, talking about creating some kind of a network of seed libraries in North America to be able to support each other. And seed libraries are a fairly new initiative. And they're ancient at the same time, but in North America there's been a few seed libraries that have been around for 10 years or so, and in the last 5 years it's gone from about a dozen seed libraries in North America to hundreds, maybe even thousands of seed libraries sprouting up. So we're just trying to create systems to share. Essentially, obviously we're all pretty into sharing, and we want to share what we've learned in different kinds of handouts and other kinds of organizational systems to help folks who are trying to start up their own community seed library. I think the last thing I'll say is that there isn't one way to run a community seed library. It's pretty obvious, and there's so many different ways to grow an individual seed, and so many different kinds of seeds you can have in a seed library, and so many different models and approaches to running a community seed library. It seems really important that it's meeting the needs of the community and is really representing the desires of the community that the seed library is trying to serve. So every community seed library is going to look a little bit different, but I think they all have something to share and offer to one another. So hopefully this website can contribute in a small way to that. The last page is my contact information if anybody would like to be in touch. A little bit more information about Life Cycles, who supported me in doing a lot of this seed library work. Yeah, that's all I have.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew. I think you did a really great job of representing the kind of energy and momentum that is backing the kind of seed library movement right now in Canada, and it's really interesting to hear what your experience has been with that. I recognize just by the participant list the number of people who are engaged in that kind of work out east, and you've addressed a number of questions that I get all the time, so thank you for that. We do have a little bit of time for questions for Matthew, so if you would like to ask Matthew a question, just type it into the chat pod there. I see a few people are doing that.
I'm sorry that there's a construction happening in the back alley of my office here in Vancouver. I see that was causing some issue.
You spoke really clearly, and I don't think it was a problem to hear you over the background noise. It's kind of ironic that it came in just as you started and finished just as you finished. Sarah Crocker from Newfoundland has a question. Yeah. She says, just wondering what evaluations you're building into the library to measure your success.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, there's a bunch of quantitative sort of stuff that we've been gathering information about, like how many seeds are being signed out, how many people are signing out seed, and also basic kind of information about who's attending events and how people are hearing about the seed library. But we're also trying to ask people about things like what kinds of changes have you witnessed as being part of the seed library? Has the seed library influenced your sense of community, trying to ask questions around whether or not it's helped people build relationships with other members of their community or helped them learn more about gardening or about seed saving. And it's something that I'm really interested in trying to do is to figure out how we can measure the long-term impact of our work in seed libraries. And there isn't really a lot of work that's been done in trying to track what kind of impact does this kind of community seed sharing have. And I really feel strongly that there are impacts on individual and community health and ecosystem or ecological health. And I've actually been thinking off and on about doing a PhD trying to develop an evaluation system to look at how do we measure that? How do we kind of say whether or not we're having success? So it's a question that I would love more input on and get help with.
Yeah, that measuring impact is always such a difficult and important thing to do, hey?
Yeah, definitely. And if I have an evaluation sort of like, I guess it's like our evaluation plan and what we do each year. So if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email and I can send it to you. I think it's also actually on the BoroSafe Share website.
And what we'll do after the webinar is send out a resource list with anything that speaks to questions that people have, and we can put we can include that website on there as a reminder to people to check it out. We have another question from David Baldwin. He says, what has been the best way you've experienced to engage and maintain new people?
Well, I think that one thing that was really effective with the Victoria Seed Library to engage people in the beginning was actually some media that we got through the local paper. The local paper in Victoria ran a short story on the seed library starting, and that gained, we got a huge amount of attention and a lot of people coming out as a result of that bit of media. So as a sort of getting new people involved in the beginning, that was really quite helpful. And then kind of trying to engage and maintain contact with people. We've done a few different things. Like I said, we have these different events and workshops, and we've been trying to do more like on the land, on farm type seed saving and getting out to local gardens and farms to engage people in hands-on stuff. And we've been hearing from members that they really want that. They don't just want to come and do a workshop in a room in the library. They want to actually be out learning, touching, tasting, feeling things. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is to just have like a quarterly newsletter that we can send out to people so that people are really aware of all the different opportunities to engage and get together. And the last thing that we find that we want to build and do better, and I've seen done really well in other seed libraries, is hosting events for people to come together and process seed together, so that once all the seed is returned in the fall, you get together and have these big work parties where you package up the seed and get all the seed ready for the next year and have food and, just like some sort of social event around seed for people to come together, for volunteers to come together and to be able to work with seed together in community.
Awesome. Yeah, and Jane has made the comment about the mix of in situ and ex situ conservation that you're kind of alluding to, and I think throughout the next couple of presentations, we're going to see a mix of those approaches in terms of how people approach seed conservation. So thanks, Matthew. Time allowing, we will have a little bit of Q&A time at the end of the webinar, I hope. So perhaps for now, what we'll do is thank Matthew and introduce our next speaker, Axel Diederechsen. So while that presentation loads, I'll say that Axel Diederechsen has dedicated his career to the conservation and study of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture to support ecological and economic viability of the food and agriculture sector. He obtained a PhD degree from the University of Göttingen in Germany in 1997 while working at the German National Gene Bank of the Leibniz Institute for Plant Genetics and Crop Plant Research at Gadersleben. Pardon my terrible pronunciation of those words. Axel has worked in plant breeding, and since August of 1998, he's been the curator and research scientist for the Canadian National Gene Bank Plant Gene Resources of Canada at the Saskatoon Research Centre of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Axel's major achievements are in the field of diversity assessment and evolution of flax, coriander, oat, and pulse crops. From April 2010 to June 2011, he also worked in Sweden conducting a study on wheat diversity. I'll also just say that our program team had the great pleasure to visit Axel at PGRC in Saskatoon last year, I guess, or earlier this year, and it was a real treat. And Axel gave us a lot of good information then, and so I'm really excited to include him in our webinar now. So there you go, Axel. Your presentation is loaded.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you very much also to Bob Wildfong for the kind words he had at the beginning of this. Yeah, it's a privilege to be invited to present to this group because I think the work you are doing and Seeds of Diversity is doing there is an excellent contribution and very important there. This is now a presentation from the Canadian National Gene Bank for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. Our name is Plant Gene Resources of Canada, Ressources Phytogénétiques du Canada. We are located at Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. And as I said, this is the Canadian National Gene Bank. It's hosted by the Department of Agriculture. Yeah, the next slide, yeah, I can do it here. Yes, so there you see our gene bank. The picture above was taken end of March 2013. I like to show that sometimes. End of February, I should say. Beginning of March 2013. So this is how spring looks here. It was -28 that morning there. So it's located at Saskatoon. In 1970, the Canadian National Gene Bank was established in Ottawa. It was moved in 1998 to Saskatoon, and the reason were there were two major reasons. One was that the facilities in Ottawa were too small, they couldn't host the gene bank anymore. The other reason was that there's a lot of plant breeding ongoing here at the University of Saskatchewan, and they wanted the gene bank to be close to those activities so that there's more utilization of the collection. The mandate of Plant Gene Resources of Canada is to acquire, preserve, and evaluate the genetic diversity of crop plants and their wild relatives. The focus is on germplasm of economic importance or of potential for Canada. There are three main deliverables of the Canadian Gene Bank. One is viable germplasm, so anybody can send requests to us. The second is relevant information about the germplasm. We have in our collection about diversity in the germplasm that is communicated via our website, or we do some research or evaluation projects and publish about that. And the other contribution, and that's in the global context, that we try to prevent the genetic erosion. Bob Wildfong also mentioned in the introduction to this seminar. There are three major strategies for conservation of diversity of plant genetic resources. And here you have three pictures. You see 1, 2, 3. You see three pictures that illustrate a little bit the three strategies. On one end, you have the in situ or on-farm conservation. The picture is here a picture that I took in 2005 in Ukraine. And there you have a triplet. It's corn. You see the tall plant, that is corn or maize. And then you have a pole bean that is winding around the maize in intercropping. So they are grown together, the bean and the corn. And then you have a squash. So this triplet came actually from the New World, entered Europe, and was very successful. It's an intercropping situation. You have a legume plant that provides nitrogen, and it provides also a lot of protein in the diet. You have a starch plant, the maize, that gives you a lot of energy, and you have a vegetable. On this diet, you could live, and it's a very sustainable combination. So this is an in situ on-farm situation. Typical, people grow this, they share this on small scale. Evolution is ongoing. There's outcrossing happening, and they will reselect what they need. So it's a dynamic, steadily adapting to the environment. Evolution is ongoing. There's strong interaction with the farmer and the biological diversity. and the primary users or the interacting happens also among farmers and consumers directly. The question is whether this is stable, because the socio-economic context for agriculture has changed and continues to change, has changed drastically during the 20th century, and in particular in Canada, this is very evident. This type of agriculture you will hardly find in Canada these days, while in other places of the world you may still find it. So a lot of this diversity has been lost with the change of agricultural practice. The second approach is the ex situ, or the traditional active gene bank, which we are also here. We grow out the material, but we try to do it in an organized fashion. So here you have a self-pollinator. We can plant, this is oat on the picture there, we can plant the plants in proximity. Each row is a different accession. We plant them out, then we do an assessment of the agronomical traits or morphological diversity. We have a database where we record that information in the field, have a database, can provide the information so that we can say this line has this quality, this line has that quality, and we keep the seeds. It is the idea of gene banks, they want to keep the material static. That means the diversity should kept in the stage as it entered the collection there. Whether we really can achieve that, I put a question mark there. It is what we strive to do, so any contaminants we try to avoid. It's not that we want the evolutionary active process you have in the on-farm situation. We try to preserve the material as it was when we received it. Our function is it's not so much an ongoing evolution, it's more the storage and the assessment of the diversity, that you get an overview over the diversity in the gene pool. That is very important information for plant breeders, for all types of research. We generate knowledge there, and our clients are also first of all plant breeders and associated research. Whether this is a stable way of preserving diversity, I also put a question mark there, because we depend, of course, on government funding. We also are affected by environmental issues. Something could happen, a tractor could drive over this plot. This seed box can fall down. We can mix up the labels. So I also put a question mark there. And then you have the third extreme when it comes to conservation of plant genetic resources. That is the strict storage over long periods of time. You maybe have heard of the Firebird Global Seed Vault, which is located in Norway on the island of Svalbard. It's about 1,000 kilometers south from the geographic North Pole. So it's very far north in an environment that is very static. So in a mountain 18 meters above sea level, they built this tunnel, and there are 3 storage vaults. There's permafrost, and then they cool it down to an additional minus 18 degrees. And all gene banks around the world are invited to deposit duplicates of their accessions, a small sample of 200 seeds in those seed vaults. In case we lose them here, we could have a water damage or a fire or whatever, then we could retrieve seeds from this place. So in idea, it should be very static. The emphasis is on storage. It's not knowledge generation. It's a strict administrative exercise that is done there. And the clients are gene bank managers, because it's not for the general public or for the gene bank clients directly. It's for other gene banks to retrieve samples in case we lost them. Whether this is stable, I think you can also question it, because even there something could happen, and the access is not easy, and the viability is not monitored they don't touch the seed samples. It's our task to go back to that. So if something serious would happen here, you could still wonder how stable this is. So that was a long introduction, and the principles there. The holdings and our gene banks, you see them illustrated here. The emphasis, as you can see, that is on the cereals. Oats, we have a large collection of oats. We have a world-based collection that's nearly 28,000 accessions. More than 40,000 accessions, which is samples, or you can say bags with seeds of them, of barley. Wheat, not as big, although it's an important crop for Canada. The reason is that here for barley and oat, we have the world-based collection, so many gene banks around the world have shipped us duplicates. And then you see other germplasm, which is of relative importance. We have a big flux collection, crucifers, that includes rapeseed or canola, so that's relatively important for us. Clonal germplasm includes fruit germplasm and the potatoes. You see vegetables, we are relatively weak. One reason is they are very challenging to preserve. Per-annual insect-pollinated outcrossing. The economic importance is maybe not as evident as for the others, although in proportion they are probably underrepresented in our gene bank here. There are 3 centers that work together in this, and Saskatoon has the seed storage centralized here. We try to do as much of the regeneration and characterization here in the field. The best seed quality you get in the field, not in the greenhouse. If it's possible, we try to do it. Or we have other locations that collaborate for doing a field increase of the material. In Harrow, we have the fruit germplasm, and in Fredericton, there are about 160 accessions of potato germplasm. To give you an idea how many people we have working here, as you understand, this is the government, so it's public servants working here for the most. We have students, we have occasionally casuals working for us. This was the situation in this June. So it was 17 persons here at our research, at the Saskatoon Research Center, including 1 administrative assistant, 7 technicians, 2 professionals, which is 1 biologist who looks after the crucifer germplasm, and 1 computer expert who handles our database, and 1 research scientist. The core activities, germplasm storage, I mentioned that includes viability testing, regeneration and characterization. We do, it's around that range what we do every year, and you saw it last year when we toured the field here. Evaluations for disease resistances or quality traits, we do that often with other colleagues. Acquisition of germplasm, that happens through exchange with other gene banks, or we do collecting nationally and internationally. It's about 3,000 would be the maximum, it might maybe less what we receive every year. To often breeders that retire or whatever and donate their collections to us. Distribution of germplasm to clients nationally. It's about 4,000 accessions per year. Documentation and information of germplasm is available from our website. You can access that and then you can search on it. We have associated research for molecular assessments. We have a colleague here in Saskatoon and 1 expert on oat in Ontario, Dr. Yongbi Fu and Dr. Nicholas Tinker. For disease resistances, we have colleagues here at the university for doing assessments, and then the morphological agronomical assessment. That's what we do in the field, where we go then and measure traditional descriptor traits to have that information available. In the international context here, we ship the germplasm free of charge. It's small amounts of seed, as Bob Wildfong indicated in the beginning. It's about 200 seeds maybe, 100, 200 seeds that per accession there. Of our shipments, 40% go abroad. We have to follow phytosanitary regulation, in particular when it goes international. And the base for exchange is the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. There's a material transfer agreement. This ensures that this germplasm is in the public domain and remains in the public domain. It's part of the multilateral system that is international. You can say the international public domain, if you want to say that, for germplasm, and the Standard Material Transfer Agreement regulates that nobody can put exclusive rights on this germplasm that is in the system. about 25% of our seeds we have backed up. I showed you the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, part of it also in the United States Department of Agriculture. This illustrates a little bit the number of germplasm shipments we have made between 2002 and 2013, so it's about 45,000 accessions. The number per year fluctuates a little bit, and the number of shipments is about 100, 120, so that means there are 120 clients who approach us. Some want only 2 or 3 accessions, some maybe 200, 300. So it's about constant. It was on average maybe 4,000 shipments per year, and as I said, 2/3 within Canada, the other international, so it's to 55 countries. Cereals are important for us. I mentioned it before. We have the cultivated species, we have crop wild relatives. Here's an example of barley, the big barley collections. What we put out in the field, we have special collection, male sterile lines, wild barley, so it's not the cultivated one, but crop wild relatives. This is a typical outgrow of our flax collection. We have a big collection in self-pollinating, so we can put them close to each other. You see the diversity there. Crop wild relatives, this is wild oat. We have to put bags on the seeds because they shatter. So to capture the seed and to avoid that we have weed infested fields afterwards. We have some clonally propagated material. This is an example of Jerusalem artichokes. We keep that as a field gene bank. 157 accessions, quite labor intensive, important for Canada. And a lot of other plants. Here's some rhubarb. We collected that even in proximity to Saskatoon on old homesteads, and so on. Sunflowers, barley, beans, also important for us, and scarlet runner beans. This is our website. You can access this for documentation and allows others to inspect our collection. So in summary, this is the Canadian National Gene Bank. We operate in the international context due to germplasm exchange, collaboration, and legally binding agreements. Part of the biodiversity and collection units of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and has mainly a service function essential for many research and breeding projects nationally and internationally. I said my time is up here. I sent you now. I think I will submit this. I made once a video. Not all of you had a chance to join a field tour. I made some videos about our plots. One of those I send you now the link. If you want to go there, you can see. You can have a field tour of our wheat plots there. It's done pretty amateur-like, but still gives you an idea of how a typical grow out of germplasm would look like if you have a cereal. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Axel. That was a really efficient tour, kind of from one end of the spectrum of small community-held collections all the way to the much more international collection that ships globally, even touching on the Svalbard seed bank. It's amazing the amount of information you just gave us. Thank you. A couple of questions have come in from you during your presentation. We'll take these two at least. So Geneviève writes, in terms of the current context, what is the biggest threat to gene banks or the main issue that they face on the policy front?
Well, I'm not a policy expert. I would say that it's not wrong to say that gene banks all around the world are struggling because this is this conservation preservation activity is not necessarily cutting edge science and it sometimes may get a little bit neglected in the larger context because it's usually associated or part of science-related budgets. So I would say that this conservation aspect is an issue. Other issues are, of course, in genetic resources. This is very much, we have to think of the international context. As Canadians, you will realize that a lot of the crops we have here have been introduced, and we depend on this access or also in the international scale, and to make sure that this is done in a fair way among countries. I would say this remains an issue, and it is in tendency. It's getting more difficult because property rights and so on, they enter this sphere more and more. So it's very important to work also in the international context to keep the flow of germplasm possible, because it's essential also in a global perspective.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps this is actually a great follow-up question to that. Jane has asked, in the context of being a signatory to the treaty, what more can we do to fulfill our obligations, and what would you like to see more of in Canada in terms of biodiversity conservation?
Yes, yeah. So if you say we, you mean Canada as such, or you mean Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, or mean you as the seeds, or the more on-farm movement? Could you specify that, or do you mean Canada in general there? Could you specify that question, because otherwise I'm not sure on whom you want me to address that. If it's in general, Canada in general, I don't get a response there. If it's Canada in general, then I would say that these activities you are doing there, and I have seen that now for the last, since I came here since 1998, this movement has really increased. And I think that's a very positive contribution, because we have interaction with those people. Even we had a project here locally last winter with people growing out tomatoes from our, last summer I should say, growing out tomatoes from our collection. And then we went to, Bob Wildfong was there. We went in the end, they had an event there talking about the experiences and so on, where people get an understanding of biodiversity, and that it's not something abstract or something extreme scientific or whatever. It is something you can shape, or you shape yourself if you work with it. This, the awareness for this has increased very much, but I think that's positive, and I hope that will continue. Also, and there I still see potential for doing more. So maybe that is the response I will give. Of course, there are many other things we could do and I could wish for, but this aspect I think is very positive. Now I see the specification here. AFC as such, as a signatory to the treaty. Well, now you put me on the spot. I would think it's good if also AFC continues to be open to all the different players and actors in this field. That's probably what I would say there. I hope that satisfies you.
Okay, Axel, fielding some tough questions from the crowd here.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think what we'll do in the interest of time is you guys are welcome to keep on sending questions, and we'll see what we have time to address at the end.
And I apologize for the horrible spelling errors in my video. It's not heat plots, it's wheat plots, and it's a video, of course. So please correct it if you can. They don't look good. So you apologize for misspelling my name. I apologize for mispronouncing all words in your beautiful English language.
Thank you, and yeah, we will circulate that link when we send out follow-up resources to people, and we'll correct it to wheat.
Good, thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. So I guess I'll introduce our third and final panelist for this webinar. Rupert, there he is. Rupert Adams has been involved with growing food, medicinal herbs, and seeds for just over a decade through intentional communities, organic and biodynamic farming. In the past 8 years, working with Salt Spring Seeds in Diederechsen, as well as the Salt Spring Seeds Sanctuary. During his time with Salisbury Seeds, Rupert has been working alongside various seed growers to actively increase the production and availability of ecologically grown seed due to an ever-increasing demand for it. Participating and teaching at various seed-saving and community seed bank workshops through groups such as Transition, Cowichan Green Community, and Salisbury Seed Sanctuary, he is a passionate seed head. So thanks very much, Rupert, for being here. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to the presentation.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. There was a gap there. I was like, uh-oh.
Well, it maybe pick up a little bit. It's a little bit quiet.
Okay. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, I think we'll be all right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Steph. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the First Nations of Turtle Island and especially the Coast Salish people on whose unceded territory I'm speaking to you from. So I just want to give an overview basically of seed banks and the different types of seed banks and this evolution that has been occurring over the last few decades of seed banks. And I want to say that no one of the types of seed bank is more important than the other. I think there's a place for all of the banks, the seed banks that I'm going to talk about today. But as I said, there's been this kind of evolutionary jump in the last few decades of seed banks. I think it's probably because people are becoming more and more aware of food security, and so on. It's really interesting if you go onto the internet and Google seed banks, especially here in BC, because all that comes up is marijuana seed banks. So don't be dissuaded from going and looking about seed banks. Yeah, it was kind of weird for me when I Googled it. It was like there was nothing on food seed banks. It was all on marijuana seed banks, which was kind of weird. So when we've heard a little bit from Axel about seed banks and some different types of seed bank in his introduction. So what is a seed bank? Two definitions here. A facility used to sow seeds of various crops and wild plants in an effort to maintain biodiversity. Also a place used for storage of seeds as a source for planting in case of seed reserves of biodiversity elsewhere are destroyed. Natural disasters, war. There's a classic example right now in the media with a request going in to the Svalbard seed bank for the first withdrawal from the bank by the International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas, basically because they've had to move the seed bank that was in Syria from Aleppo to Beirut, and now they're asking for seeds back to restock the place that they've moved to, and also to continue doing research on the seeds that they put into the vault. So even though there's a lot of criticism being aimed at Svalbard, but this is kind of an instance where it's such an important asset to humanity to have all these different types of bank that I'm going to bring up other ones. So we have the kind of traditional seed bank. There's the Vavilov Research Institute, which is one of the oldest seed banks. It's located in St. Petersburg, Russia, and it started in 1924. And it's named after Nikolai Vavilov, who was the botanist who did a lot of research on where or the origins of our cultivated foods and plants. Some interesting stories about the Vavilov Institute, especially it's as I said, it's in St. Petersburg or Leningrad, and the siege of Leningrad during the Second World War, where the seed collection remained intact, and some really quite inspiring stories. Some of the staff actually died of starvation as opposed to touching on and eating the seeds, which is a pretty incredible faith in seeds. Other traditional seed banks, Kew Gardens, which started in 1996, the Millennium Seed Bank Project, and they currently have 36,000 sessions, actually species of plant in the bank, and their aim by 2020 is to have up to 75,000. Axel mentioned the Svalbard Seed Vault in Norway, so you've heard about that. A couple of National Center for Genetic Resources in the U.S., which is the main germplasm or gene bank for U.S. agriculture, and the Plant Gene Resources Center that Axel is from and was just talking about. So one of the things that comes up about the traditional seed bank is they're more like museums than seed banks. That's kind of an interesting statement. It comes from a gentleman in Africa who wrote a book, which we'll get to later, on biopiracy of biodiversity. But let's look what is a bank, because this is kind of one of the things about the whole seed bank thing. There are so many different ideas of what a seed bank is. So let's look at what the word bank is. So it's an institution that accepts deposits and channels the deposits into lending activities. So there's an exchange. With a bank, there's an exchange. So there's actually a deposit and a withdrawal. There's the possibility of loaning. So if we kind of put it into the context of a seed bank, the seed bank is an intermediary between depositors who lend seeds to the bank and borrowers to whom the bank lends seed. There's become a growing awareness around the issues of food security, climate change, destruction of our ecosystem, seed sovereignty, and this puts into question this traditional style of seed bank, whether it's really fulfilling the needs that we have around seeds and food for the 21st century. So I'm not at all dismissing the importance of the traditional seed bank or the gene bank. As I said earlier, that's part of the whole puzzle. But equally important are seed banks that are not only storing accessions, but also growing out varieties, running trials, engaging with the public. And we'll see later on where that comes into play with community seed banks, and also increasing the availability of seed that the public can access through seed banks. So kind of moving on into that area of seed banks that are more geared towards public interaction. Two classic examples, I'm calling them contemporary seed banks. I would actually probably label them contemporary living seed banks. So we have Native Seed Search down in Tucson, which is an incredible institution. It was founded in 1983, and they have around 2,000 accessions from 50 different native tribes in the Southwest. And they have a two-pronged approach to preserving biodiversity, which Axel touched on earlier. They have the ex situ and the in situ. So the ex situ is the actual storage of accessions in cold storage, and then the in situ is growing them out on farm. They have a farm where they regularly are growing out and also sending out to the members of the Native Seed Search. So again, that's an in situ scenario, and this kind of develops the relationship between the people and the plants. And something that Native Seed Search come up and say is, in order to retain the irreplaceable genetic and cultural diversity in the collection, we ensure that the seed remains available, viable, and accessible to the farmers and gardeners who can save them. It is only through this ongoing process that the seeds can develop adaptive traits to meet environmental changes, which is becoming such a pertinent topic right now with climate change and just general environmental changes on our planet. Another organization in the same vein here is Seed Savers Exchange, founded in 1975. They have 13,000 members, and they're basically making available endangered food varieties to the general public and farmers and growers in general. And they carry, I think it's 25,000 accessions, which is pretty phenomenal. So when we're kind of seeing this evolution through time, with this evolution of the contemporary living seed banks here with Native Seed Search and Seed Savers Exchange, excuse me. And then what we've been seeing mainly in coming into this century is the development of what people are calling living seed banks. So with the living seed banks, the seeds are being grown out every year. And this is super important for plants to be adapting to climate change and other environmental changes. Somebody's flicking my slides. And the living seed banks tend to have a decentralized membership. And this membership is responsible for growing out the seeds. This kind of does come to the issue which was mentioned earlier for seed libraries and maintaining purity of seed. But with the living seed banks, the people who are growing out the seed are experienced seed growers, so are pretty, fully aware of isolation distances, minimum population size, and the different members within a family that will cross. And with the living seed bank, a percentage of the seed that's grown by the members is then returned back to the central location. And quite often with living seed banks, they'll have a yearly gathering to exchange seeds between members. And this is definitely a really good example of this is the Politi Living Seed Bank in Greece. This was actually originally started about 18 years ago. But the actual seed bank itself, or the true initiative, was taken in 2012 to form. The alternative community was originally about preserving seed, but now they've sidetracked into this idea of the living seed bank. So they're keeping the seeds, concentrating keeping the seeds from reproducing and germinating so they don't fall victim to genetic erosion, which is especially important with climate change. And the collection they have is now surpassing the size of the national seed bank in Greece, which is pretty phenomenal. And the other thing with this living seed bank, it's become extremely important in Greece due to the whole financial meltdown that has gone on, which I don't know how totally aware people are in North America what has been happening in Greece. I know from working with seed companies, the amount of seed that we've been sending to Greece in the last 6 or 7 years has been quite substantial. It's quite amazing. But this living seed bank has really taken off because more people have had to actually go back to the land and start growing their own food because the level of poverty is quite incredible. So this really shows the importance of the living seed bank. Closer to home, we have another living seed bank in the Seed and Plant Sanctuary for Canada, also called the Salt Spring Seed Sanctuary. So the sanctuary is dedicated to health and vitality of the earth through the preservation and promotion of seeds. That's the mission, the main mission statement. And the other things that we're interested in doing here is record keeping, which is really important. The more information there is on seeds that is available accessible to the public and by the public, then it's way harder for corporations to patent any varieties involved. With the seed sanctuary, one of the things that we've been trying to address is this bulking up of seeds and making larger amounts of seed available to growers and farmers, which brings us to the role of community seed banks. So community seed banks are something that are springing up literally all over the world, and predominantly in developing countries, for resilience and for all the reasons that I put down here on the slide. So supplying seed to growers and farmers. It's locally grown seed, so it's adapted to that climate. And so the farmers, it's set up as a bank, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, where people become a member of the bank. They can deposit seed, they can withdraw seed, they can take loans on seed. So it actually is functioning more as a true bank. And money is not the currency. Seed becomes the currency. So I would take out some seed, I would grow out some seed, and then I would give at least what I took from the bank originally back to the bank. Usually it's a percentage of the harvest. So you're building up stocks of seed in the bank. The bank never, the stocks never diminish in the bank. So there are many functions of this whole idea of community seed banks. As I said, locally adapted seed increases the availability of seed and hence the food security regionally, strengthens community resilience, and again, it's keeping seed in the public domain, which is increasing seed sovereignty. A really good example of a community seed bank that I experienced myself is Navdanya in the Doon Valley in India, which was started by Dr. Vandana Shiva. And here in the seed bank, they have roughly 5,000 crop varieties, and they're focusing largely on the preservation and biodiversity of grain. And Navdanya now has piloted about 54 community seed banks around all around India, and there are some other groups as well working within India. One of them, the Green Foundation, again focusing on this idea of community seed banks, where it is a bank and the currency is seed. And they said, increasing seed security, food security, seed sovereignty, resilience of community, and there's definitely a movement towards this idea of the community seed bank. The one thing that comes up with any type of seed bank is, and it's kind of a strange scenario in a way. It's like backing up your backup. So this importance of backing up seed, especially for community seed banks. So again, this creates local resilience, dealing with regionally adapted seed, and so backing up seed leads to this regional network of seed banks, which I mentioned Andrew. I didn't mention Andrew Mashita by name earlier, but Andrew Mashita, together with Carol Thompson, wrote Biopiracy of Biodiversity, and one of his concerns was with seed banks, the larger, more traditional seed banks, was that to be backing up your seed somewhere where you can't afford, like literally financially afford, to go and check on them. So what Andrew Mashita has come up with is this idea of redundant regional backup. So it's a network, basically a network of community seed banks, where each bank has samples and is backing up the seeds of the other banks. And they're also experimenting with growing out each other's seeds because of different microclimates, different weather patterns in different areas. So this whole phenomenon of redundant regional backup is something quite new, and it's something that's being experimented with in Africa. And super important, again, for food and seed security. And finally, one project that's been worked on here in BC is actually developing this network of community seed banks. And along with the community seed banks, there's this educational element where you're teaching farmers, teaching market gardeners, teaching growers on the different aspects of seed saving and combining it with the seed farm. So here in BC right now, as I said, we're working on this network. We currently have a seed bank starting up in Powell River, which is kind of central coast, which is only accessible by ferry. We have a seed bank starting down in Duncan. We already have a seed bank here on Salt Spring. So we're starting to develop this network and exchanging seeds, which is going to be, it's really becoming more and more important as we become more and more aware of food security and especially seed security. I think somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Axel, that was actually Bob mentioned, you know, it's becoming a little bit cliche as well, is that there is no food security without seed security. So all these different ways of seed banking that we've talked about today, they all have their level of importance and they all intertwine with each other, and super important to have all the different types of banking that we mentioned, as I said. So from the seed vaults to the seed exchanges, to the living seed banks, to the community seed banks, and the gene banks. So thank you very much for listening, and if anyone has any questions, type away.
All right, thank you very much, Rupert. I know there's so much that I'd love to ask and comment on about the idea of seeds as currency and the whole idea of what real value and what real security means. We have just a couple of minutes left in our webinar, though, so I won't use up that time on myself. There are two questions that have come in, and I'd like to give you guys the opportunity to comment on them because they echo some of the questions we've been receiving over the course of the year, really. But we'll just have to do it quickly. So priority here, for a couple of reasons, is going to go to Lucas. Lucas's question came in response to Matthew's presentation, and it's getting priority in part because he's here, joined us from the Czech Republic, which I think is pretty cool. So Lucas's question is, I would like to know how people succeed with keeping the purity of crop varieties, and how is that managed when you bring return seeds back to the library? So Matthew, maybe we'll start with a short commentary from you on that.
Sure, yeah. I typed up a little private message to Lucas, but I said that for us, we're only really accepting and sharing self-fertile varieties or relatively self-fertile crops so that there isn't as much risk of having things crossing and having that uncertainty about whether or not a varietal is what people claim it to be. And then for signing seed into the seed library, we have a seed sign-in form that we ask people to fill out, and we've been sort of experimenting with having different fields in that form be mandatory. So if you're going to be returning seed, we want to know specific information about the seed that you're returning. We had a very strict seed sign-in form that we started with and are realizing that's probably too strict for a lot of people in a community seed library like the one that we're trying to run in Victoria and Surrey. But if people are interested in those forms, I have a couple of different sample seed sign-in forms that I can send to people. Just shoot me an email asking for them, and I'll send them off ours and a few other seed libraries, and hopefully that helps.
Wonderful. Thank you. I also want to give a bit of space to Colleen's question. And Rupert, I'll throw this out to you. It came in during your presentation. She asks, how long does it take for seed to become locally adapted? For example, how many generations of seed would it take for a typical seed to become more drought tolerant, for instance?
That's a really good question. I don't think anyone really knows, but I mean, from the seed grower's perspective, in seed growing circles, my understanding that, for example, we just had an incredibly dry year in BC. I mean, a drought. And as far as my understanding goes, the seed that is produced from annuals and perennials this year will have in it a genetic makeup that is more adaptable to drought. See, this is something that's really, plants have a lot more genetic makeup than we do. They have at least equivalent to the number of genes that humans have. Plants, the most basic plants, have that level of genes. Most of them have actually twice as much genetic material, so they have like the capability to adapt far more easily than we do. Axel has probably got a more scientific answer to that, but yeah, plants adapt very quickly. Obviously, life cycle is a part of that. So annuals adapt way quicker than, you know, a tree that grows that's 400 years old.
Axel, would you like to comment on the question?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. If I have to give a very short answer, I would say you cannot give a general answer to this, but I would say the more attention you give to the matter, the faster you will achieve something. But you need also, I think you need a breeder or a human being somehow that takes care of this evolution. And what this individual does and how does it, that will affect the outcome. It will not, it's an intimate interaction between nature and culture, you can say, and plant breeding is a cultural activity, very essential. So the individual there is very important. So you cannot give a general answer, I think. That's a very intimate, there's no area, I think, where we are as intimate, involved in biodiversity as we are in agriculture and in plant breeding or animal breeding for that matter. So the human with his intentions and ideas and approaches is very important in that context.
Wonderful. Well, we've gone a little bit over time, which we hardly ever do. I feel like I could keep the four of you on the line for hours, and we could continue to pick your brains about this stuff. The presentations you've delivered today have been wonderfully dense and diverse, and we've all learned a lot from you. We're gonna have to call it a day on this one, I think. Bob, Axel, Matthew, and Rupert, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we will have an opportunity to do a follow-up on public access to seed and perhaps invite you back. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
And thanks to our participants. We will, as usual, send out a link to the recording for this webinar as well as the resource list for further Googling and research for you. So join us again. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.